Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Everything HR podcast. I'm your host, Manuel, founder and CEO of Omni HR. Today, Rebecca and I are going to be discussing compensation and benefits. Beck, how you doing today?
Doing all right. Thank you for having me on again. How are you?
Good, good. Yeah, another great day, right?
Yeah.
All right. So today, I want to talk about compensation and benefits. It's a really interesting topic because it's something that I feel like comes up a lot. Team members are always saying they want to get paid more, they're not getting paid enough, and it kind of comes down to like, do you see that in like your current situation as well as previous jobs? Is it salary? Is that the thing that matters the most in a job? Is it the benefits themselves, health, dental, vision, or is it possibly stock options and things like that within the organization? Like there's a lot that goes into compensation and benefits, and it's really easy to single out just salary
hmm
without understanding kind of the back end, without understanding a lot of the other pieces that go into it.
Yeah. Um, for myself, like solely speaking for myself, I find that having medical, dental, and vision is very important. Um, Even if I didn't have kids, I find it important because of the given state of my medical. You know my background, and I'm every turn we look at, I'm having some sort of issue where I need medical, I need dental, I need something examined or worked on. So not having it currently, it's taking a bite out of us, and it's rough because, in my opinion, insurance is a scam, but it's also needed when your body's constantly breaking down.
Mm.
So it puts people in a rough spot. I think that um, if salaries are hardly even giving enough for a livable wage, then you need to be offering these type of benefits. 401ks, stocks, and stuff like that. I'm a bit irresponsible, so I tend not to take them as value as they are and should be. Um, so for myself, I don't look for those things. It's nice when they're involved, and I'll let myself auto enroll into a 401k. I will not enroll into a stock because I know nothing about it.
Mm.
But it's very nice when an employer has them. Included childcare. I've seen in some companies they offer for benefits. I'm trying to get my foot in the door right now with Microsoft. If you're a person on site, quite a bit of their corporate locations offer childcare. And while we don't need it, it would still be nice to have. So there's all types of benefits out there. I can't remember when I used to work for Lowe's, they offered a discount membership at our local gym back at, you remember when we used to live in Florida.
Mm.
That was awesome. I didn't need it because we were already getting military and we got more of a discount with the military than discount with the job. But it was still nice, and quite a bit of my coworkers took advantage of that discount. So these benefits are in some matter crucial for some households. Now, speaking on a more of a fact of not just myself but others, it depends on the person whether or not these benefits are going to come in clutch or not.
Mm.
And I say that because if you were as fit as a fiddle, then I can see why you don't want to use their medical package. And in few, not a lot, in few companies, you can negotiate. I'm not using your medical package, so I would like a boost on my salary instead.
Mm.
And some will actually do that. Not many though. I've seen it in very rare cases. I've only worked for one employer who actually was like, "All right, you don't need the medical because you're on TRICARE. I'll go ahead and give you a boost on your salary." So I had a better monthly rate. But in others, it's like if you don't take it, it's just unused. You're not getting anything else.
Mm.
So this realm of benefits, and what was the other word?
Compensation and benefits, yeah.
Compensation. Yeah, that's it's more vast than people realize
Mm.
because they see it as just the words on the paper. They don't realize how much actually goes into it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you brought up a lot of great stuff. First off, you're absolutely right. It's based off of the individual person's needs, right? When I was younger, salary was 100% my only focus. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't care about health. I didn't care about any of the benefits. I didn't care about anything. Compensation was king, right? It was all I cared about. I was only looking at what does it pay hourly. then as you get older, you start realizing, sure, I have maybe a little bit of a lower compensation structure, but maybe I'm looking towards retirement and I see that this company does a 7% match on my 401k. That's a lot, like
Mm-hmm.
that's a good amount, like up to a certain amount, like you're able to invest and they directly give you money directly into the 401k. So things like that, absolutely, it's based off the individual person and based off that individual's person specific time in their life, right? Someone who's farther along in their career, maybe they have a nice bank account, they have a savings plan, they're not really worried about it. And so for them, maybe the stress of a high paying job isn't worth it. Like it's just not valid to them at the time. So 100%, it's definitely based off of someone's individual situation scenario. Flipping that, it's also based off of what the company values.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the really interesting part too, is kind of working in HR, you see that back end. It's not that you just show up and you get, all these benefits given to you. Like you actually have to go out, you have to sort, you have to like scour all these different websites, talk to all these different people, and then make contracts. It's a lot that goes into benefits management that a lot of just general team members, even some C-suites, don't see, like because they just don't have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Um,
Legal has to be involved too because depending on your location will depend on what's legal, what's not, what's required, what's not. Like
mhm.
the given the state, we live in Illinois right now, and benefits are per the state are different than Florida. And then the company has to weigh what is required by state, and they also have to weigh what's required by the country, by federal.
Mhm.
So it's so much work that's involved constantly. It's not just when you sign up you're done. It's HR is constantly busy with keeping track of this and the benefit side as well as legal.
Oh yeah, compliance is huge. Like 100%, compliance is everything. Because if you're not compliant, then you're gonna get fined. You could potentially face some jail time, depending on how extreme it is. Like there's a lot that goes into it. Absolutely. So talking about actionable items, the first thing that I like is the strategic compensation planning, right? So the very first step of that is identifying what kind of company you are. What is it that you value as a company? Because your values are what you're going to then instill to your team,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when you're developing your compensation philosophy, you're really just developing the culture and then the goals of the organization, combining that together and making sure that your structure is with it. So what that looks like realistically is, for example, if you have a sales team, they're doing cold calling, they're doing direct sales, commission is going to be huge. Like that's going to be an instigator of how you really drive forward goals. But on the other hand, a lot of car dealerships and other sales locations like that, they're actually getting rid of commissions because they want it to be a low stress situation, or they want the car buying experience to be low stress. Typically, if I know that I'm only getting based off commission, I'm hitting every sale with force, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to close every deal. Every time someone walks through that door, that is my customer. I'm going to close that deal.
Yeah.
That can be kind of a unique experience that not every customer wants to enjoy, Not every person who's trying to buy a car wants to haggle, right? Not every person that wants to buy a car wants to try to get sold. Sometimes they're really just looking,
Yeah.
but that's a perfect example of the compensation philosophy. Your compensation structure is what's going to push forward your team. Another example of that is if you have a staff and all of them are getting paid $100,000 salary, you're automatically boosting what they're expected to do. Because if you have, let's say, like an HR generalist, you could have an HR generalist getting paid, minimum wage versus someone who's getting paid 100K, you are able to then hold them to a higher standard because of the salary. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, it
just
does.
it's really interesting, and I think that it's something that's super downplayed. But this is kind of one of the things that goes back to team members and individuals. They aren't getting invested in anymore.
Yeah.
And because the companies don't invest in them, they leave. And then the companies are surprised. Like, well, yeah, you have high churn or you have a high turnover rate because you don't, like, you're showing them that you don't care.
Yeah.
Like, if they're telling you, hey, like, I have bills, I have things like these, and I'm not getting paid enough, then you need something else to hold them. And a great way to do that is through questionnaires, is through just asking your team. Because if you have staff members who've been with you for 10 years, they're staying with you for a reason. Find out why. Is it that the compensation is solid? Is it that there's a certain benefit that they think that they can't get anywhere else? If so, that is something unique to you and something you can then push forward and you can then kind of market as your unique station.
Okay. I think that going back to what you had mentioned about the competitive environment with the sales, given someone that that has not dabbled in sales a lot, I get very annoyed by sales representatives swarming me like seagulls.
Mm.
Um, but at the same time, I recently found a newer respect for the sales representatives and anyone in sales because that is it's they have to be sharks. They have to be sharks because they have to survive. And it's it's due to the competitive environment that has been made like you mentioned. And the reason why I bring it up is because medical is becoming a competitive environment. And what I mean by that is that there are certain hospitals now, and I had to research this after watching a particular show last night to see if this is actually going on, and it is. Certain hospitals now are making it to where their doctors, their whole staff, salary has been severely decreased, and they are going to be paced based off of the procedures that are done.
Mm.
So essentially, commission. So now doctors are in an arm race to perform surgeries, unnecessary surgeries on people, just so they can get that paycheck. And in my opinion, that's an environment that should not, nor never should be, a competitive environment. Because having healthy competition between two doctors because they want to see who's the best, that's fine when they're keeping it healthy. Having it between them because they are trying to survive, and the only way that they're going to be making the figures that they need to make it to pay whatever they have, um, or get to wherever they need to go by overcharging people for medical procedures is insane to me. And it's not just the medical environment, it's there are a lot of things shifting in this country that are very unsettling. Our first responders are uh if you look at the fire departments, many fire departments, are volunteer based, which means that they're not paid and we're severely understaffed. If that's the case, wouldn't that mean that they would need better, well, for one, they would need a salary. For two, they didn't need benefits. You expect someone to go running into a building surely because of bravery and selflessness. That doesn't fly. They may have a family that they have to return to. They need a salary, they need benefits. And many aren't getting that. I found out from a nurse practitioner today. She's, like I said, a nurse practitioner. She does not get health benefits whatsoever offered through her company. That is insane to me. So having that offered, I had to go back a little bit before I had forgotten, but having that offered, especially in these W-2 jobs that are legally required to have them, but they're not there, huge lawsuit, in my opinion. But you're also straining your employees.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that goes into what kind of philosophy do you want your company to have, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the doctrine that your company is then holding your team to a certain standard, and compensation is the first step of culture, right? It's the first thing that people pay attention to
Yep.
when it comes to the development of your company's culture. Are you the kind of company that really values having sharks, right? which is good for certain positions, but at the same time, it's also really bad, right? I
Yeah.
don't want to go into my doctor's office, say I have shoulder pain, and then being like, oh yeah, I actually had a cancellation for a surgery this afternoon. Let's throw you right in.
Yeah, let's change out your rotator cuff.
Yeah,
I didn't need that.
yeah, you didn't ask me any questions. I
Yeah.
have no idea.
Immediate surgery. What? That's
But
insane.
yeah, but that it could end up being something maybe not that extreme, but that is definitely an example of what it could look like based off the compensation structure. Because if you take it, these doctors, these physicians, they have been living a certain lifestyle due to their current compensation structure. If you then change their compensation structure, limiting their lifestyle, they have kids, family, like they have all these things that they hold dear and that they care about.
Yep.
They're not going to risk their personal lives and the lives of the ones that they love.
Yep. And a lot of people will say, well, this is why you should be living within your means. What a lot of them forget is that a doctor's means have changed. They're no longer making in the low five figures. They're now making in the mid six figures, sometimes more, depending on what their specialty is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's their new means. So now that they can afford a beautiful house over in Cali, and then suddenly their company decides we're no longer going to pay you that. Instead, you have to get surgeries and to get paid that. Now they're living above their means because their company decided to shaft them.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And then, like you were discussing a little bit earlier, the compliance of it. There's a lot that goes into compliance. You have your federal legislation, you have your wage and your hours, you've got pay equity, benefits compliance. Like there's a lot that goes into it, and not every company
Yeah.
is
And you say
as
a lot.
forthcoming.
You say a lot, but I don't think people realize the wide range of this list
Yeah.
and how long it goes. Because a lot of people, I say a lot again, but people hear a lot, they hear etc., they hear many more, and they assume, oh, it's probably just another 2 or 3 items. And that's not the case. It's a very lengthy list of things. And that lengthy list is just showing you the key terms of what they're covering. It's not showing you everything it actually entails.
Yeah.
So I don't think we'll just focus on the United States, but I don't think the United States population, the American population, realizes, for many of them, what they are getting in these W-2 jobs and what they're not getting, what they're taking for granted, and what they need to be fighting for.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for the company owners, the CEOs, and whoever is up there, I'm not familiar with the top dogs, but for them, I just recently listened to a podcast with a CEO who is under the impression that McDonald's workers are making 6 figures.
Maybe specific corporate members.
No, he's talking about store McDonald's workers.
That's hilarious.
And at first I was like, this guy is out of his mind. But then it dawned on me that he was genuinely serious, that he assumed McDonald's workers are making that much because he was taking what the inflation has gone to in the US and assuming what the new livable standards were and going based off of that. So when he eventually found out that's not the case, and McDonald's workers throughout most states are still fighting just to get $15 a minimum wage, he was astonished. It's like no one can live off of that. And while it's supposed to be a transitional job, for many, this has become the norm. And this is what they need to make ends meet. So I can't say that he speaks for all CEOs, but it makes me question what a lot of these top dogs think that they're paying their people.
I mean, that's definitely a great point. We're going to be talking about top dogs during this podcast, by the way, because there's actually a really interesting story I'm going to bring up about Boeing's CEO. It's actually a big controversy right now.
We should disclose that we are a very happy family. We have no thoughts of suicide, so if we go missing, we know who to go after.
I
don't want to touch Boeing, but since you're going to bring it up.
So talking about benefits and the compliance. So kind of going a little bit more, you're right. People don't understand all the different compliance that are out there. So I'll go real quick. This might be a little bit of a slower portion, but I definitely think that you're right. It's something that people need to understand.
Yeah.
So one big thing is retirement. So you have the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, or ERISA. And for that one, it's basically just reporting, disclosing all your fiduciary responsibilities.
Fiduciary.
So as a company, you have to make sure that you're filing, you have to have clear communication, and you have to make sure that all the retirement savings and all the information is getting properly reported. And this goes to the IRS, this goes to the state themselves. Another one is ACA, the Affordable Care Act. With that one, it is an employer mandate. You have to make sure that you are, once again, reporting. Benefits is like 90% reporting.
Yeah.
It's like all it is. Next one, COBRA. Same thing. Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally just...
People don't realize how much the IRS has to know.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much information. For that one, it's once again reporting. It's tracking your notices. It's making sure that you identify all qualifying events, maintaining tons of records. I remember I was working in an HR location and everything was paper still. And one of their big tasks was getting all that into an electronic database. I mean...
Was that the one back in Florida or the one here in St. Louis?
Here
oh,
in St.
yeah.
Louis, yeah, just hours of just paperwork. Just so much paperwork. Just, oh yeah, we have to file all this. Like, okay, sure.
And then they show you the entire closet. And they're like, oh, there's more, but not just here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they had legitimate, like, almost like bunkers of just more documentation.
I said closet, but that makes it sound small. So to give a little bit more of a mindset, this was probably the same, this closet was about the same size as a Burger King lobby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so with the benefits and compensation, kind of the compliance, another really big one that I know that you've personally dealt with as well is FMLA.
Oh,
right? So Family and Medical Leave Act.
I so many times.
And I mean, FMLA covers a lot because it covers military leave. It covers just getting sick leave. I mean, some company use FMLA like a sick leave, like as if just, you know, oh, you have the cold? Well, see if you can get FMLA.
It depends on the company. And the reason why they do it, I learned this while working for a particular hardware store. But the reason why they do it is to protect your job. And the one who told me to put for FMLA when I was going to be out for a week was the head of HR. And they told me to do it because they were aware of things that I was not. So they said, you need to put in FMLA because although you have your doctor's note, you may not have your job when you come back. And they weren't wrong because you remember this was during your deployments.
Yep.
Went on your deployment, had FMLA, came back, and they said, we have you in the system as terminated. Everything was documented, so I was covered after they fixed it. But that showed me how quick they were easy to write me off. So it was just, it's baffling. Yeah. And I see why people have to take advantage of FMLA because they're scared to lose their job. This may be it for them. And when you're the sole earner for your household, even taking FMLA, you're too worried to do it. So you're just like, I'm just going to have to push through. Broken leg? That sucks. I'm going to work.
Yeah. I mean, but that's another big one, right? Is your paid time off or just sick leave, all of that is part of your benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't realize that. They're like, oh, well, I'm required to take this. It's like, not really. Like, you're allowed to have time off, but as far as paid time off and things like that, it's kind of up to the company's discretion. Now, there's a lower limit.
You have to weigh your laws. And I tell everyone who talks to me about this, because they will tell me their company's requiring them to use their PTO. However, state and federal law does not match. And when you fight them on that, you will notice that your company will suddenly change their handbook.
You brought that up before.
Yes, I have, because I have the experience in it. So, I recommend everyone do their due diligence. don't give up, because then you're getting taken advantage of, you're getting shafted. You may even lose your job. And a lot of these lawyers who supposedly fight to get you compensation for being fired, they will not take up a case unless they see a large output for it. So then you're really just down a drain.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's definitely a big one. All right. So the next part after compliance, so, once again, going kind of more operationally, thinking about how you can really take some of these conversations and then put them into action. You've got your compensation planning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So developing your compensation philosophy, what kind of culture do you want to have? What kind of culture do you want to represent? And then everyone that you hire, you bring into your culture,
Yeah.
right? Remember, it's not that you're hiring people to change the culture. Your culture should be there, and the people you hire is jumping into that.
Yeah.
From there, making sure compliance, right? I want to do these certain things. This is all like really cool stuff that I want to make sure that we include. Are you able to? Is it allowed to legally? So then you have the
Mm-hmm.
compliance side. Another big thing that comes a little bit after compliance is just the governance. And what that I mean is executive compensation. So shareholders, SEC regulations, they have their own expectations that you have to make sure that you're matching as a high level leader.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings us into our little conversation about Boeing. So, have you heard about the payment? So I'm just talking about the salary, no conspiracy theories or anything crazy like that. I'm just talking about, HR related. Boeing CEO David Calhoun, his salary increase versus the overall Boeing kind of
No.
team. All right. So basically, his current salary from last year to this year was an increase of 45%. And I
That's
don't have
that's a huge increase.
and I don't have all the numbers. But basically his base salary is 1.4 million, but his total, including stock awards and everything else, his total compensation comes out to about 32 million per year. And
I
then
just wowed if you didn't hear that. I was like, wow.
so that's with a 45% increase.
Mm-hmm.
Most of his employees, and here's where it gets a little interesting because a lot of the Boeing employees are actually out of the US. So that's kind of where like a combination comes from. Most of them in the last, I think it was like 7 years, had an average of a 1% increase over the
Oof.
entire time frame.
Wow, way to
So
put salt in a
so
wound.
almost the full decade, they had around a 1% increase, and then him in 1 year had a 45%.
Yeah.
And now look, I'm not one to judge a CEO based off the amount of money they make. They are running the entire organization. If anything happens, like large scale, he's going to be the one that people are going to be pointing at and blaming. So
Mm-hmm.
I certainly understand that a CEO, you're the highest position, you should be getting paid the most, but
Well, is that, I hate to interrupt you. I was going to
mhm,
ask you, is that payment to himself after everything is done? And I'm talking about all the expenses are paid per, I don't know how CEOs operate. So I'm just going to assume like per the day. We'll go by the day. Is Are his payments that are being put out there on the internet coming in after everything has been said and done, such as the employees, the facilities, liabilities. They just recently had another plane issue, so taking care of that. So are those funds coming in after everything else has been paid for?
I
Because
mean, not necessarily. So when you think of a CEO's compensation, the way it typically works, or even just like any high level, because most C-suite, most VPs, like they have a similar compensation structure. They have their base salary, and then they get paid just like everyone else, right? So like they have a monthly paycheck. Sometimes it's like a half a year paycheck, so they'll get paid like twice a year. It really just depends on their structure, but they get their payments just like any other employee would. So if the company is in debt, if the company is facing certain issues, they're still going to be getting paid. And like this is a very large generalization. So obviously every company is different. Every CEO's compensation is going to look different. But for the most part, the ones that are paying themselves that have been around for quite some time are getting paid like a standard employee. Like they're getting a monthly paycheck or they're just getting a paycheck in general. And that's what's covering their expenses. But they typically get a bonus at the end of the year, or there is some sort of additional, like a stipend or something that comes on top of their base salary. And that's what, for example, taking him, his base salary is 1.4 million, but then his complete compensation is 32 million.
So I'm not entirely sure if I understand here. Are you
Okay.
telling me that this is what he gets paid and then he covers expenses after he gets paid, or this is what he gets paid after expenses?
Well, it's going on at the same time. So most companies live in debt. So like even if the company is facing a lawsuit, even if the company is facing debt, he's still getting paid. Like it's not like there's not a break in the payment. Does that make sense?
No. But I think it's like, remember, I'm in the pool with the little men. I'm not up there with the C suite that like understands all this stuff. So you got to break it down, because if I don't understand, that means many others don't understand.
Well, just think about it this way. A CEO gets paid just like anyone else.
Yeah, I got that part.
So anyone, like if you would get a paycheck, then your CEO is going to also get a paycheck. So if a company faces a lawsuit, if a company is in debt, if a company is, no matter what problems a company is facing, the team members are still going to get their monthly salary.
Okay, I think I understand it. If you mapped it out the way I think, then I probably would understand it even faster and I wouldn't have you hung up so long. So if we're looking at how I get paid currently,
Hmm.
I get paid, then I pay all my expenses.
Yes.
That's what I had asked you earlier. Is
Well,
that how that he operates? Like, is that what goes on with him? He gets paid and he pays all the expenses, or is he getting paid after expenses have been taken care of?
I mean, that's the part that I'm not sure what, like a company is going to pay you no matter what, right? So if let's say for example you're working for Publix or CVS. So you're working for CVS and then CVS faces a lawsuit. That doesn't change the fact that you're still getting paid.
Right, but that's now you're separating the entities.
But
You're
that's
you're
exactly what it
separating
is.
employee from company, and I'm obviously not C-suite. I'm talking about the
But see,
CEO
but
of
that's
Boeing.
that's what you're trying to do is it is separate. Just because they're the CEO also doesn't mean they're the owner. So that's another separation. Remember, CEO is just a job.
So does he or does he not pay for any of Boeing's expenses?
No, not outright.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was the question.
But because the company does. Remember, the company. So here's the thing: when it comes to creating an entity, that's what the business, like an S corporation, a C corporation, like that's what they are. They are an entity, living, breathing companies, and that's what's responsible for everything
Which
else.
is fine. That's not what I originally asked you. So now that we're a little bit more on track,
All right.
the CEO does not pay for Boeing expenses. That's what we covered.
Yes, CEO does not pay for that.
Okay, which means he got this 45% increase
Uh
when
huh.
it could have been maybe 20%, and then the rest of Boeing's staff could have gotten a better percentile increase.
I mean, possibly. But here's the thing as well is that the CEO is not responsible for their own increases alone. So they
Right.
have a board of directors. They also have to follow SEC regulations. Like there's more that comes into it.
But I'm sure that the CEO does negotiate their contract and make it ironclad to get those finances.
Well, not really. They have it's up to a vote. So the CEO may request an increase, but
Mm-hmm.
just like anyone could technically request an increase. You know what I mean? Like when
Yes.
you like for myself when I was working at a company, I would negotiate for an increase. This is the work that I bring. This is the amount that I believe that I'm worth.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I still hold the CEO responsible in part with the board, because the CEO, like anyone who needs votes, just talks them their way into gaining those votes. So obviously they know what they want to earn, so they're going to talk it and negotiate. Hey, this is what I'm worth. This is what I think I can bring to the table. Whisper in the ear more and more, and they get that. While the staff who are working down below and putting everything together are not. So if what you said is accurate, in the last decade, the entire Boeing staff is shafted.
I mean, Yeah, so that's one perspective, right? Because when you think of it, Boeing is a very sought after company. People want to work at Boeing. So are they actually shafted?
I'm not entirely
Or
sure if people still want to work at Boeing with all the so-called conspiracy theories, the issues among their technology and equipment, the engineering. So I'm not entirely sure if that's still accurate.
yeah, it's definitely people still want to work at Boeing. Like it's Boeing is just like Microsoft, it's like Tesla. Like if you're not winning, you're not facing lawsuits. Like that's just how it is, you know. What a lawsuit is someone wants money. I mean, obviously not always. That's kind of an over exaggeration because a lot of times there is a very legitimate reason for a lawsuit. I won't necessarily say that.
Sometimes it's just trying to set an example.
Yeah, sometimes it's just, you know, trying to do more. Um, but that's one of the things where it's really up to perception, right? Like we're completely having this conversation right now. That's literally
Which
what it
is,
is,
I
right?
think this is one of the great things, outcomes of me being in the little man pool while you're trying to achieve becoming a top dog. Because you are a CEO, you have the mindset of one, and I have the mindset of, what do you call us?
Like team members. I mean, that's it.
Eh,
The workforce, general population
I think
workforce.
you say that because you're much nicer about it, but I'm sure that there are others that like call us squibs or something. I don't know. But I think that's one of the kind of the benefits of us being on different dynamics, because you see work styles as a CEO
Hmm.
and HR, which is very beneficial for yourself. And I see it more so of for the people. And
For the people.
yeah, but I'm
I
not a
like it.
politician.
I like
So,
it.
um that's where a lot of our perceptions kind of clash, and that's okay and everything like that. For in my opinion, going back to Boeing, the with the way that living means have gone up also within the last decade and wages have not increased, um that's why I also find it that the CEOs, the boards, top dogs are responsible for taking care of their people.
Mhm.
And by throwing pizza parties on Friday is not taking care of your people. It's not. And while you can say I'm offering medical, dental, vision, 401k, that's great. It really is. But if you can't balance out with salaries as well, then you have a problem. Your people are struggling to even get to work at this point,
Yeah.
not just surviving in life. They can't even get to the job. At this point, we're paying for our gas to get to the job, to then pay for gas again. And it throws us in a loop. Forbes magazine shared that last year, business owners, CEOs, boards, they made the most money than they have in the last decade.
Hmm.
How you see how this ties up though?
Yeah.
That is that's like, come on, we got to really think about it. Of course business owners made the most money within the last decade because they're not paying their people. They're hiking up prices in stores and anything that you're paying for. And it's the little people we're hurting. We're hurting bad.
Yeah. I mean, that's. I definitely get where you're coming from, and I agree. It's there is a disconnect in which companies, and this isn't just now, but this is just the entire kind of corporate veil that we've got right now, the entire corporate culture, is companies think that for them to win, they have to kind of screw everyone else over.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be
Well,
like
they
that.
describe it as it's the ocean and we have to be sharks.
Yeah.
And that's, I understand that's kind of the mindset of how to get your company to be successful, but then you really mess up those who can't swim because you're not helping us to learn how to swim.
Yeah. And then people look at the government as if they're the life preserver.
Oh my gosh, and that's another issue, but I would prefer not to bring politics into the discussion.
Yeah, I definitely yeah, it's certainly an interesting one. And then just looking at looking at that dynamic, the entire compensation structure, how much can you say as far as what does that breakdown look like? Like when I say compensation, like in totality, what exactly comes to mind to you?
Can you rephrase that? Because when I hear when I hear compensation, my my immediate thought is like you know, if you took this drug from between this date and this day, you can be compensated. So I need a little bit better
That's
of
really interesting that your mind directly goes to
because
that.
I
But
hear it all the time relating to lawsuits and these class actions. So it's like the latest one is on TikTok. We can always talk about that outside of the podcast, but
interesting. Well, no, I mean like this, like compensation benefits. Like when you think of a company offering compensation benefits to an employee, what comes to mind? What is your immediate thought?
still on the lawsuit side. So I don't know
A
it like
company?
because compensations are different than benefits, correct?
Well, so interesting point. Yeah, we can talk about that. First off, benefits is a part of compensation. Think of it this way: compensation is everything.
Like I
So,
can think of comp time, but that's about it.
well, that's a part of it. So,
Okay.
compensation is if you work, you're going to be compensated. You're going to get paid for the amount of effort that you put in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, when you think of compensation, you've got your direct compensation, so like your base pay. So when you think of base pay, hourly salary, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, you have your variable pay. So also direct compensation, you get bonuses. So that could be performance bonuses, signing bonuses, referrals, retention bonuses, but basically just an additional payment to your
I
original,
thought those fell under benefits.
all compensation.
Okay.
So when you say a compensation package,
Hmm.
it's everything,
Okay.
including all the benefits. Because remember, you're getting paid by your benefits. So when a company looks at its compensation, it's not just, okay, you're getting paid $12 an hour. It's you're getting paid $12 an hour. That costs us $12 an hour. You're also getting paid vision, dental, medical, pharmacy. Like you're also getting all that. The company pays for all of that, which means you, as an employee, that's part of our compensation to you.
Where does a company car fall under?
A company car could be an indirect compensation because it's something that is owned by the company and it's lended out to you. So it
And the
would be
company just
indirect.
maintenances it?
I mean, sometimes that's actually more dependent on the organization.
I gotcha.
But like, you don't have to pay like taxes on it. You don't have to pay things like that because it's under the company's corporate veil.
Okay. So
But
okay, the only thing I knew because I was under the assumption that compensation, like I mentioned, it was relative to lawsuiting, but besides that, I only thought of if I'm salary to work 8 hours a day, but I run over, I get compensated that time, and not always was that the case. And
not for
some of
salary,
my
yeah.
some of my fields, which I most recently learned that your employer is legally required to pay you for your time that you are working, regardless.
Well, that's also dependent though because salary, you're getting paid for 40 to 60 hours of work.
Correct.
So
But if you
then,
work over those hours,
but that would be like if you work more than 60 hours. But the trick, though, is that you're not logging in your hours a lot for salary. You're just working.
I logged in my hours every day for salary, like with our
Were you
boss.
salary or were you hourly
This
when you
was
were logging the
both because
hours?
we had a login for both, and even when we got switched to salary against our wishes, by the way, they didn't ask. They just told us we're getting switched. So even when we got switched, we were still required to literally clock in and clock out every day, which I was like, what's the point in switching? But yeah, we were still required to do so. And then the company in particular, this was the casino.
Mhm.
They had that cutoff for us, 40. That's it. So our direct manager made sure that if we are going to get to the 40, even if it's prior to getting to our weekend when we had off, then we were allowed to leave early or just take a day or, to get that time to
Yeah.
ourselves. But not everyone is so lucky. Like
Mm.
looking at my mom, she's a perfect example. 40 hours salary via contract, not compensated for any extra time. And she was working 80 hours a week.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely interesting, but that's a big part of it, right? But that's also a part of the corporation's culture. They're showing that they value your time less because of that.
Mm-hmm.
When I signed a salary contract, it was for 60 hours. So I was responsible for the entire time, but then it always felt like I was cheating the system when I got all my work done under those like required
Yeah, I
hours.
didn't have the what is that? The luxury?
Yeah.
Because with being in IT, so long as something's turned on, we're required to be
Yeah,
there.
something's always happening there.
Yeah.
So going back to direct compensation, you've got, like I said, your base pay, right? So you already know that's pretty the classic stuff, your salary, your hourly, your wages.
Mhm.
And then your variable pay, that's the stuff that it's not it's dependent on something, right? So you've got your bonuses like I talked about, incentives, you've got short, long-term incentives. You've also got commissions. So that's also based off of another thing. So if you're selling or profit sharing, things like that. Next up, stock options. And then equity. So owning parts of the company that you work at, or they offering you like restricted stock units, purchase plans, grants, things like that. All of that is part of direct compensation. And then you've got indirect compensation. And with that, you think of more of the benefits that come with it. So, health and wellness, retirement benefits, life and disability insurance, paid time off, all of that, even bereavement. Like bereavement leave, that is a benefit
Mhm.
because the company is allowing you to do something.
Which I don't even see why it's even a discussion. Bereavement, maternity leave, I get if it's not paid. But the fact that there are companies that are saying no to those who have to take off for them, saying no to moms who have to take off for maternity leave, how? If you call off, you're getting fired.
Yeah.
You're firing a pregnant mother. How is this at all legal in this country? I don't understand. It's not, but there are a lot of people who don't know their rights and they don't know the laws because they're told something that's in a handbook that someone decided to write up, not paying attention to their laws. And then there's bereavement. I have seen a father that had to go to his mother, her funeral,
Mm-hmm.
and was not approved bereavement.
Yeah.
And he was told, if you take off, you will be fired.
It happens. It happens quite a bit, honestly. And that's a part of it. And for those, it's the same thing. It's the culture,
Yeah.
right? Because it's what kind of company, like, what are your values? Is it
It's profit over
just,
people.
exactly, is it just the profits? Is it just the corporation that you care about? Because I will admit, the higher up you go in the corporate ladder, everything becomes spreadsheets, everything becomes numbers. It's not like, and I saw that a lot in the military. I was working on the ground with some guys, you're in it. Small teams, always working in it. And then you would talk to a colonel or you would talk to someone else, and then they would discuss deaths like as if it was nothing.
Yeah,
They're like,
they,
yeah,
they
man, that's a
call
lot
everyone
of,
a number.
yeah. They're like, oh, man, that's a lot of training hours and a lot of investment wasted. I'm like,
We just
sir,
lost this guy.
that's 8 guys that just went down. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And that's just one of those things that people just don't make that connection. And work-life balance, that is a benefit.
I think this ties into the old saying of money, hunger, and there's another one that's like when it comes to money, you will never be satisfied. So, I'll repeat myself because I know I was a little quiet, but this ties into the money hungry saying, and when it comes to money, you will never be satisfied. You'll never be truly satisfied because you'll always be seeking more. You'll always be seeking what's the next step. And when it comes to that, especially those with power, you tend to utilize your power, not you, but people tend to utilize their power for not what would better their people, because they should be putting their company and their people first. But instead, they're trying to figure out what ways they can cut corners and dodge a bullet. If it's illegal, is it really being noticed? And it's really sad to see that. And then they wonder why no one wants to work. It's it's like no one wants to work. There are some people who say that they want to work. I think it's just because they want to keep themselves busy.
Yeah.
And but no one wants to go to a job to bust themselves, to destroy their bodies, their mindsets, to get hardly anything to come home with and say, "Yeah, I really want to do this for the rest of my life." No. But I'm like I'm gonna just chill out for a second. I'm gonna hand this back over to you.
I mean, like, the stuff you said absolutely makes sense. And the thing is that I think this is what happened. The thing that makes you successful as a small business is that you have to be a shark because you have nothing. Like, you are by yourself. You are only reliant on yourself. You have to bust. You have to work as hard as you can. You have to do
For how long?
overtime. Well, that's the thing, is that it's what you need to be a successful small business. But then the next stage from getting from a small business to a medium, large, and then enterprise, it's not busting anymore. It's not killing yourself or your team. It's recruiting, it's training, and it's leading. So that's the difference. And that's what you have all these small like business leaders, and they keep that same mindset of I just need to grind, I need to kill, I need to shoot, I need to do whatever I need to do to make it happen. And then you take that same person with that same ambition and that same mindset, and then you put them into a large enterprise. They're just going to keep doing what they're doing because that's what gave them their success. And you can't fault them because that's what brought them success, but it's just hard to identify when you're already there. So that's something that HR is kind of that like HR is the consultant. HR is the group that needs to care about the people the most. Because if they're not doing it, the CEO has to kill what it wants. It has to eat what it wants. Because if the CEO isn't doing that, then the company's not going to move forward. You said when it comes to money, you're never going to be happy. It's never enough. We've had this conversation between ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And I've said it's not just about the money. It's there's more that I can do. Like I can get bigger. I can go farther. I can hit more of my key points and I can make something bigger from what I have. It's not just about the money itself. It's about everything else and having that ambition. And that's the CEO's viewpoint. But if they don't have a strong HR leader to be like, look, you shoot for the stars 100%, but I need to take care of this team. I need to see each person as an individual. Yes, you can use HR analytics. Yes, you can use all these metrics. You can put in all these structures. You can make things easier to scale, but you need to keep in mind it's human resources, right? You need to keep the humanity in it. And I don't think the CEO should always focus about the team because he can't. There's only so many things that he as one person can focus on. That's what HR is there for.
But if the CFO and is not, hold on, let me get my words right. If the CFO is not relaying the what the HR department might be telling them about their employees and the financial discussions that the employees are having with HR, then wouldn't that still be a problem? If you're still being a shark, you're not paying attention to everything and anything. You're just eating. You're not paying attention to your environment. Correct?
Yeah, well, that's one thing is that the CFO isn't always in charge of HR. So that's very
No, but they have
dependent.
to communicate with each other, correct?
Well, yeah, but just for like budgeting, for finances. So like they have to communicate, but it doesn't go directly through the
So who
CFO.
pays attention to the employees getting their raises and paying attention to this is changing in the country, so we need to change for this. We need to change these finances for our employees.
HR. Yeah, HR is doing that. Some CFOs do that. I'm
And
not gonna.
HR requests that to their CFO, don't they?
Well, they actually. So the interesting thing is the HR departments typically, if it works, in my opinion, the best way is HR is on their own. They are not responsible to any other department because they have to lead and they have to manage, they have to view every other department objectively. You can't do that if you're internal to them. So they actually have to be an outside consultant to the CEO directly.
Are you telling me that HR is the problem?
Well, that's the thing. So, yes, because that is a part of it. HR is a problem. One of the problems is that you have incompetent HR professionals. That's just the way it is. You're going to have incompetent people in any profession. Another one is that HR is only a consultant. They cannot drive change alone because the person that can truly accept these changes is the CEO, is the owner of the company. You know, it depends on the size of the company, obviously, but whoever owns the company, that is the decision maker. That decision maker is the one that actually has to work with HR. So basically, you have ideally this is how a company scales, right? This is how a company like moves forward. And this is actually a different podcast that I wanted to have a conversation on. We kind of like
We could do
grew
like
a little
tidbits
bit.
and then come back to another one.
Well, I'm really passionate about scaling small businesses. So that's one of the things. But um, the CEO and their structure, they should be a shark. Because if they're not a shark, that you can't rely on anyone else in your company to be the shark. Like you have to want more for your company to succeed. Like they have to be the spearhead. And then they need to listen though to whoever their HR department is. Whoever their top dog in HR is, that person has to be like the calming voice. They have to be the one to be like, "You're right. We do need to do X, Y, and Z to get to the next stage of revenue or do whatever. But if you give me the ability to train, to lead our team, to conduct performance reviews, to like harden our recruitment process, our onboarding, then all of our team members will automatically get better going through that process to then succeed. So yes, we can still, still take the shot, but we need to also care about the team on their way. So that's definitely a big part of it. So like I said, I do want to have a full conversation on just scaling small businesses and then how to get to the next stage of revenue.
I have a question
Yeah, go ahead.
before I forget, if you don't mind. So with all that in mind, would it be safe to assume that if a company is having essentially a rift, like their employees aren't getting paid what they need to, there's poor rapport, so on and so forth, would it be safe to assume that possibly whoever is in charge of HR, whether it be the HR director, the VP, whatever, is not meeting eye to eye with the CEO?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
because
I've seen a lot of companies that don't have HR at all.
well, that's the thing is that you can't have the shark by themselves because then they'll just kill everything in the sea and then eventually die, right? Like if you had the big ocean or whatever and then you took a shark and you dropped it into a lake, so like take a high level CEO mindset and then put it in a small business, you're going to kill all your team. Like nothing's going to survive. You need that calming person, or you need that person that kind of thinks of, let's think about the compliance. Let's think about how we can operate more efficiently. Let's think about the kind of culture that we want our company to have. That's what HR should be doing. But then if they're not good, or if the CEO isn't identifying that like the HR department is actually doing what it says it's going to do, or it's making all these commitments and it's not seeing it through, like you can't blame the CEO every time if it is HR's fault. Like if HR recruits a dirtbag and then they don't train the dirtbag and they don't hold the dirtbag accountable, then it's not anyone else's fault if the dirtbag gets fired and you have high turnover, right? Like it has to be equivalent. It has to be across the board. And with the larger the organization is, the more you see it. But you think of it this way, like if you have a bunch of studs, right? Just a ton of people that are just great at their job, they're motivated, they want to be there, they want to do what they want to do, then you're obviously going to succeed.
Yeah.
But it's connecting the HR mindset and the operations. So that's it. We're going to have a full podcast on connecting HR to operations, scaling, and things like that. We're talking about.
I have a question. I don't know if it'll go into that topic. I don't know if it's on topic with this one. I'm trying to stick to the topic. It follows up with what you just mentioned. So, given the HR's functionality and who is on the team, if they're studs, fantastic. If they're duds, that sucks. But when it comes to the CEO, they can fire HR personnel, correct?
Yeah.
But what about the employees? What if the employees have a trash HR department, because they have to go to someone to complain, right? And usually it's HR. But what if it's HR themselves? That's the problem.
I mean, that definitely happens. And then you would have to just go directly to the CEO. So that's the thing is that when you have a company, the way that it's structured really matters. HR should not be a part of finance. It shouldn't be a part of operations. It shouldn't be a part of any other department because they have to be the objective viewpoint on the outside.
They have to be the neutral party.
Exactly. And with them being on the outside, that does make it more difficult to necessarily hold them accountable in the situations that you do have a bad department or a bad HR leader. In that situation, the director or whoever it is that's like identifies the issue needs to address it with the decision maker, who in that situation would be the CEO. It would be the owner. And that's it. Like it's
So the employees would have to go around to the CEO.
yeah. But you would it's kind of the same way as like if you are an entry level team member, right? And your supervisor sucks. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're just bad, you talk to the manager. You go one step up. If you're a supervisor and then your manager is the problem, then you skip the manager and you go to the director. If you are, the manager and the director is the problem, then you go to the next stage and you go to the
You
C-suite.
have to climb the ladder.
You just climb the ladder. That's
And then
it.
if you're C-suite, you're CEO.
And if the CEO is the
You need
problem,
to just leave.
you go to the board of directors.
That's rough.
But
Especially since they're like the information to even get a hold of them is not usually given.
I mean, yeah, it could be somewhat difficult, but typically, like, they have an email or some way to contact them. It just kind of depends. But I mean, you could use LinkedIn, like you could shoot them a personal message. Like there's ways to do it.
Well, I meant like just trying to find out who's on the board,
No,
if
I mean
there's a
that's
board.
public though. Like well, if it's a public company, it's required to have a board. If it's a privately held company, then there may not be a board of directors. And then if you have an issue with the CEO in a privately held company, then you have to leave because they are the owner, they are the CEO, like they are
Yeah.
everything. So yeah, but I mean that's it. It's just you're just playing leapfrog to get to the next decision maker.
So you mentioned that the HR has to be on the outside. Does that mean a third party, or is that an internal HR? Like, what is the
No, you
difference
can.
from an HR that is employed by the CEO's company versus if that CEO was to hire Omni HR, an
Yeah.
outside source?
So this is
I
we're
know it's a
definitely
little
not
different, but I'm
in
curious.
compensation benefits, but okay. So there's a few different types of HR. So going just like very blanketed overstatement, you have third party HR and then in-house HR.
Hmm.
So in-house HR, your HR department, right? You can have a successful in-house HR department. Like that can very well happen. In my opinion, that's the best way to do it. The problem is building it and then scaling it to a point that will help you with everything else.
I would think that the problem is that there would be more likely cause of favoritism because now that they're in house, that they're getting more interactions with the people in their company. Wouldn't that, like looking at the casino, most people didn't even know who was in the HR department till you got hired.
I mean, yes, but that's just an example, right? Like there's a ton of different types. In-house HR, you want that communication with your staff and that face time, that face value, like what you said, like what I brought to them, like that's important because it shows like I have someone that I can talk to that I can trust. And there were other people that they spoke to, like HR, they had other subjects, but your third party HR is fully objective, right? Because they have zero, like I can fire anyone in any company because it doesn't hurt me personally. They're
Hmm.
not my friend. They're not, my buddy. I don't know necessarily their backstory. Like I can be fully objective. Let's just discuss the facts.
Yeah.
You can still do that with HR internally as well. But when I say like objective, what I mean by that is using just the facts. So, for example, if I had an HR department, whoever that leader is cannot be responsible to anyone else other than the CEO directly. So, for example, when you look at like a hierarchy or like a tree, then you've got the CEO as the top dog. Under the CEO, you probably have like a CFO, a COO, and then a CIO, right? Just like we'll keep it simple right now.
Hmm.
And then all of them report directly to the CEO. None of them report to each other. They just report to the CEO. That's where the HR has to be. Like they have to report directly to the CEO. They cannot be under the COO, the CIO, or the CFO. So like if you have an HR director, like let's say that your company's not big enough that you don't need like a C-suite HR person, that person should still be responsible to the CEO directly.
Okay.
Like it just, and that just makes it so that way, like if there's an audit to payroll or things like that, if I'm responsible to the CFO and then I notice that the CFO is doing whatever while I'm doing the audits, we don't have to go too crazy, but like, anything, any problems I identify, I have to be able to communicate with the CEO anything that I find.
Okay.
So you can still be objective because you're just using the facts. You're just pushing it directly to the CEO. You just have to have that open line of communication.
Okay.
And same thing too, like it doesn't just have to be, finding like malpractice or finding issues with the other leaders. Just in general, like let's say, I have a team and that team is doing really well. I need to be able to communicate that with the CEO. Because if you don't, no one else is going to. Like, no one's going to tell the CEO, hey, this, our food and beverage department, killing it. Like, they are doing so well right now, right? Like, if you don't tell them, no one else is going to. Or, hey, our maintenance team, like, they have a few issues, they have some complaints. I've identified those complaints. I've dissected them. These are the ones that I think are really critical that we need to address.
Hmm.
That's it. And then the CEO at the end of the day has to be like, yes or no, but you have to give them that information objectively. Like there has to be a communication between whoever the top dog is and HR. If you don't have that communication, it's always going to be the company, it's always going to be the shark mentality because that's what got them to that stage, right? It comes down to it. Like you have to focus on, okay, that's my goal. We're going to get there no matter what. I get it. That can definitely be our goal. Let's just push it out one extra quarter because right now we have X, Y, and Z that like we need to focus on because we're not compliant, or we need to focus on because our turnover, we increased by 15% turnover in this department. Like this needs to be addressed. I can take care of it. Just let me know.
I got you.
You know what I mean? Like but it's that communication is what you need to like really succeed. Like you have to have the shark, you have to have that mindset. Otherwise, the company is just going to stagnate. But you also need someone that cares about everyone as a human.
Sounds good. Thanks for breaking it down.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, we're pretty much done now. I was going to talk about non-monetary compensation, stuff like that.
I mean, if we could do it quickly, we could do it quickly.
Right. So, um, when we're talking about indirect compensation, you've got, your benefits, like we talked about a little bit, work-life balance. I know we kind of discussed very, very little bit FMLA, things like that. But even just having flexible hours, being able to work remotely, all that is considered a benefit. Childcare, like you discussed, on-site childcare,
You just
that's
said
really
that
huge.
working remotely is considered a benefit.
Yes, it is. Flexible working.
That's crazy.
I
We are
mean,
in 2024, and that's considered a benefit.
yeah, that's considered a benefit because the company is changing their structure to make it more convenient for you. Isn't that a benefit? If the company has been on site for 15 years, but then because you, the snowflake, wants to be remote.
Did you just call me a snowflake?
No, I'm just saying in general. But like because the individual person is like, well, I want to be remote because it's more convenient for me. I like getting up out of bed and then sitting at my computer. The company is literally changing its entire protocols because of what you want. Isn't that a benefit?
That's a stretch.
I
And the
mean,
reason why it's a stretch because of the way you described it, it's a stretch. Because COVID was the big eye opener for remote working, right? And there are a lot of people who do exactly what you said. But there are some that they need remote work.
Yes, but
Not just
then they
because
would.
of it's convenient. Like I don't have to drive, I don't have to change. Like this is it. I wake up, I log in, let's get to work.
Well, then they need remote work. They should look at a remote company.
Mm,
You're
but
this is the
then
thing.
you're like borderline violating ADA. And
No, it's not. Okay. ADA has nothing to do with remote work. Those are completely different. Um,
if your job does not have ADA compliant workspaces, then yes, it does.
you have
So
to put in a request for ADA. It is not
you don't
automatically
know, you
given.
don't put in a request for ADA. I'm
Well,
saying if your company,
uh-huh.
I'm not saying one that you're applying to, like you're
Yeah.
already there, and you need to change to remote because something has happened in your life, and they do not have ADA standards. They have to switch you to remote unless they're willing to go and then change the physical output of your work location. And some places they can't. Like they may not want to, but some places they just can't. So I can see that. And then there was another.
Well, even just using ADA. So typically for ADA, there's a whole process that goes into it. Like you have to go to a doctor, they have to like write down a thing, and then, for example, if you work in a warehouse, right,
Mm.
and you are a loader, like you're not going to get a remote job like with that company. Like it is a warehouse position. Like you were hired on to do a
That's not always
position.
the case. They may change your job
They
title.
may give you the opportunity to make a change if they
Yes.
have it.
Because that's what happened to me at Lowe's. Remember, I got injured. My arm got injured, and
Yeah.
they switched not from a remote because I didn't ask for it, but they asked me, "Do you want to go on disability, or do you want to switch departments?" I opted for departments because disability in the area only gives you 70% of what your income is, and at the time, my income was crap.
Yeah, those are benefits. Like those fall into the benefit categories because they are changing their specific situation for you and your unique situation. That is a benefit. So like in
I don't see
general,
how it's a benefit though. It's like,
well, it's
would
just
you
like how.
fire someone for developing a disability? That's
Well, I
because
mean, like if you hired someone for the job and then they can now no longer do that job. I mean, like let's say this. Let's say it's
if
someone
they're
who
a
has a high.
100% cannot do that job, then they would have to be on disability.
But then there you go. And then I'm paying you now to
But
not
if it's
work.
not, like if there's alternate means, I don't see how it's a benefit, whereas it is a given. Like that's
Well, see, I think another big thing is you're thinking of it as like Lowe's or like CVS or like Home Depot, like a large
give me
enterprise.
an example. I could probably find you an alternative
Okay,
within the
cool. A
company.
small business
Okay,
who is solely working on solar panels.
sales, remote,
Okay, they only do door to door sales.
wheelchair, remote.
Okay, but then that's
If they're
not,
doing door to door, that's technically already a remote
but
job.
that's not ADA, and that's also not necessarily a remote job. So, like as I'm saying, like it's very
Because
unique to the
wouldn't it be
situation.
considered a remote job? Because a remote does not mean you work at home. It means that you work outside of your office location.
I mean, it can be. That's a little bit more like specific because when you are going door to door, if there's a step, you know what I'm saying, like steps like that, things like
You
that.
skip that house. You
So
just
wait,
need the
so
vehicle
I
to get
just
in
I
and
just
out
want to point
of.
out as well. So you're saying that if someone has a disability, you would prefer them to take a wheelchair in a street to go door to door with that wheelchair to do sales versus just them finding a different job?
It's only if they need it. Like if this person, I'm not saying like they would have to do it. No, I'm not forcing them to do it. I think that's where you're getting a little skewed up with this. If this person is like, I do not want to leave this job, they show me, and I'm not a business owner, but just putting myself in the shoes. If they're like, this is my job, this is what I love doing, I don't want to leave. I don't want this to be the reason why I leave.
Hmm.
Okay, let's find an alternative.
I get what you're saying.
I don't see how
Mo
that has to be considered a benefit. That should be a given. You have a team member who is driven to stay with you, regardless of the reason why they want to stay with
that is
you.
also a very unique, like that's a very specific situation. There's not a lot of people that like that's. I'm talking about very general discussions here, Beck. Like When I say remote work, I'm not talking about a super driven
All right,
employee
but
who
you
really wants.
specified someone trying to use a wheelchair getting to and from a door. So give me a general example.
I mean, we're gonna move on because,
Because
like
you don't
I
want me to
said,
prove you wrong.
no. I mean, all right. So a general example of being remote or even just like ADA. Let's say someone like let's say you right now as or not you right now, but like you with that warehouse position. You working in a warehouse or something like that with a broken arm is a liability now to the
I can
company.
easily do clerical work.
What if
If
there's
it's not
no
if it's not remote, I can find an
a
easier.
small company cannot pay you if they don't have the funds. So if you were hired for a specific position, they are budgeted for those positions. I can't just give you another one.
Yeah, you can. I've seen companies do it left and right.
Large companies,
Yes, and I'm talking about two specific large
and I'm
companies
talking
that I
about
used
a
to.
small company.
You gotta let me finish now. Uh, oh, you're talking about a small
That's what I
company.
said.
You said
Yes,
warehouse. I've never seen a small company operate out of a warehouse.
there's tons, tons and tons and tons. You have any small company, any small apparel, any clothing, any company that's just like doing. I mean, you have companies that use their own garage like a warehouse. Like there's a lot of small companies that use warehouses.
All right, so we're using something like that. I still don't see how uh, switching from the more labor demanding job to a more clerical position is not feasible.
Because there's not a budget for it. Like there's a lot that goes into the background of a high like of a small business at a high level management that a lot of individuals don't see. If I have the budget for just warehouse and I can't even afford an admin staff, I can't I can't
Wouldn't
use
that be
you.
a you problem though? Because like if you can't afford an admin staff to make sure you're, I don't know what the terminology is for the labor staff to make sure that they
Mhm.
function. That's a problem that you should have fixed prior to having your labor staff.
I'm just so you're making it seem like there's no reason for small businesses to be small businesses. Like you have to grow. Lowe's, Home Depot, all these companies, they didn't just show up and like have billions of dollars. They started small, had one storefront, and then grew from that. Likely the manager, the CEO, whoever like the core leader was, they're doing the recruiting. I mean, you see it with me. I do the sales, I do the finances, I do the recruiting. That's how every small company starts. So you're saying right now for me, I can't afford any like another team member. So you're saying that's my fault for not being able to just
I didn't
get
say
there?
that. You said that.
No, you just said it though. Because you said as a small leader, if they can't afford an admin
Well,
staff,
I didn't
that's
say a
their
small
fault.
leader. You said that if someone is operating out of a warehouse like structure
Uh-huh.
and they have labor staff who you are supposed to have someone managing them, that would be an admin.
That would be them themselves as that CEO or as that owner. That's what I'm saying. Small businesses is totally different from large ones. You have only worked for like large businesses, so that is the only
That's not
mindset you have.
accurate.
And then with the small businesses, you are identifying now new
No, I'm
problems
saying
that
that's
you
not
didn't have.
accurate. Like, I've worked for small businesses. I'm currently working for a small
And you're
business.
identifying new problems with that small business. Like right now, as far as payroll and issues like that, that would not have happened in a large business with a very set structure. Small companies grow into larger companies. I don't wake up and become McDonald's. You don't like as a large, like as a small business, you don't wake up and become that enterprise. It is scaling. You have a budget. You are confined to the confines of that budget. If I have $1,000,
Uh huh.
right? And my budget is of that $1,000, I cannot get to the next level, right? Like that's it. I have $1,000. That is what I am limited to. I have to wait until I get the next sale, or I have to wait until I get the next whatever. That's the front end of it. So when I talk about HR, it's the back end. When you think of a small company, there's two sides. Once again, not compensation benefits, but there's a front end and a back end to small businesses and medium sized businesses. The front end is how they make the money. So, for example, getting the client, selling the T-shirt, cleaning the house. That is the front end. That's the service of the company. That's how you make the money. The back end is all of the stuff that helps it scale. The problem is if your front end is not working to make the money, you are then confined. Every business has a constraint. So for example, if it's finances, there's a constraint somewhere. Are you paying your people too much, or are you just not making enough money? And then if you are making more money, well, then the constraint might come to the back end. Like if I'm able to sell that I can clean 500 houses, but I work by myself, that's a problem, right? Now I have all this service and all this like function that I can do, but I don't have the staff to keep up with the demand of labor. So then your back end becomes the constraint of the business. So there's always a constraint to the business. Remember, small businesses are not the same as large ones. They're not in debt. Or, I mean, sometimes they are in debt.
Yeah, but you make it seem like the small business is just starting out.
It can be, of course. Some small businesses, I mean, there's
All right,
there's
so I guess
millions of
then
businesses.
you should take it by case by case scenario. Because if it's a small business that's just starting out, and you have a disability that's going to impair you, then yeah, you're going to have to leave.
That's what I'm saying.
But
it's
I'm
case
in a
by
small
case,
business
though.
right now that has been here for what, more than 20 years, I think.
Yes, because they haven't scaled. But that's also what is the
But
constraint to the
in this
business?
scenario, it is big man's fault as to what's going on. I don't want to go into detail, but past what I do on the labor aspect and the documentation aspect. So looking into the financials, there's no HR, there's no benefits, so it's like stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
When you ask the question, my current situation is the perfect example that if something was to happen to me today, right now, him not having the means to put me elsewhere to accommodate what has happened is a him problem.
No, it's not.
How so?
Because it's at the end of the day, you are the person who has the problem. Like I said, it's not a small company cannot take care of you if they don't have the resources
Is it
for
the
it.
same case if it is an on the job injury?
No, completely different. On the job injury is completely different. If you go down the street and you break your back, I mean the company like if I go ice skating, right? And I break my leg ice skating, the company like maybe they can help me, maybe they can do something, but if I was hired for one specific job, I have zero skills for any of the other jobs. I have not shown any aspects to be worth or like be able to do anything else. The company can only help you so much. Like, and that's what I'm saying. Like maybe a large company, you have hundreds of positions that are open. There's hundreds of things that I could do because it's a large company. But that's very different to a small and medium-sized company. You're really constrained with those roles. Like if right now I have an HR, a sales, a I don't even like an IT department. That's it. I have 3 groups that I lead right now. Of those 3 groups, if one of them was injured, there's no guarantee that someone got injured in sales. I can move them to IT. They don't have the skills for it. They don't have the knowledge for it. I'm constrained in the business of how much I can help them with one another. It's the same thing anywhere else. Like there are constraints to the business. Now, for someone who's worked in a lot of large companies, you might be used to having those opportunities. Does not happen in small and medium-sized companies. You are constrained. Either the front end is the constraint or the back end is the constraint. Does that make sense?
Yeah, better
Okay.
perspective now. And I think my mindset when debating this from the start was a work related injury. So, and I didn't specify that, I didn't communicate that, so then it just seemed like babble. But different perspectives helps because I'm still on the side that if you have a predisposition, that's the correct word, right?
I mean, that would mean you had something previously. Like, for
Yes.
example, if you had like diabetes or if you have like asthma.
Yes, any type of predisposition, and you go to apply for a position that you know cannot accommodate you, I think it is acceptable for a company to deny. And I know that's technically illegal because like if you say like, "Hey, I have MS," and a forklifting operating company is like, "I'm not going to hire you because I can't trust you on my machines because you have MS."
Yeah.
That person can take them to court. Whether or not they have a case or not, I don't know. So I'm still on the side that you already know you have a problem. Don't go apply to a job that you cannot function in. If the problem occurs while working there, then I'm like I feel like it's a case by case. And I would like to see employers offer an alternative um like job title if they can be equipped with it. But when we talk about it the way you put it in perspective, I can understand it not being the case. Especially like if you're an employee who can't read and you're doing a labor position, you get hurt off the job.
Hmm.
And you're like, "Hey, I got hurt outside of work. I need a job that does is not labor intensive." Your options are almost to none
Yeah.
if you can't read. And I've today's era, I've seen a lot of adults who cannot read. Um, so I understand it now, and I agree with it.
All right. Well, if you stuck with us this long, I appreciate it. If you like the content, go ahead and rate the show. And if you're feeling a little crazy, maybe share it with someone.